we just had possibly the biggest blue post come out since the start of Season of Discovery, and it features huge changes to the game to come with the regional resets starting next week on March 5th, as well as some information towards future plans for the season. Today I'm going to be breaking down all the news which has just happened, giving some thoughts on it, and talking about the future of Season of Discovery as well. First up is that alts are back on the menu, and getting your character up to level 40 is going to be really fast. So just before Phase 2 started, Blizzard added a buff into the game called Discoverer's Delight. This increased all XP gains between levels 1 and 25 by a massive 50%, and this was really aimed at getting people up to speed and into Phase 2 content. Well, next reset, this buff will be available on all characters from levels 1 to 39, and on top of that, it's being increased to 100% bonus XP. Blizzard said that this had been intended to happen when Phase 3 started, but they've opted to bring it forwards to right now. So not too long ago, I made a video about things I would have wanted to know before Phase 2 began, and I decided to cover something in regards to how to approach this seasonal server, because as much as it's seasonal and Blizzard are changing things, swapping to play the flavor of the month class or spec just really isn't a viable way to play vanilla. Everything in the game takes too long for people to do this, from leveling, finding your runes, gold farming, professions, and so on. And I ended off the video saying something along the lines of, you should settle on a main which you can enjoy, whether or not it's the best at everything, or you're probably going to burn out. And, well, now that has completely changed. I think after the reset, you pretty much can play the flavor of the month class on a more reasonable schedule, and 100% bonus experience is more than you can get in Wrath of the Lich King right now with heirlooms. In fact, it's 25% more, and as much as I'm a big leveling enjoyer, and always have been, it is a seasonal server. Many new specs or class identities are not only now viable, but they're doing really well, so it's only natural for people to want to play more things than they may have had time for. I mean, right now I'm waiting for the reset, then my shaman is going to be zooming all the way to 40. However, this faster grind to 40 has the chance to bring some new problems to the game too. In fact, I bet I can tell you exactly what some of those issues will be, but I'll get onto those a little bit later. Alongside the XP buff, Blizzard are also reducing the cost of mounts and their respective training by 50%. This is to account for players leveling at a much faster pace and having less time in the world to farm, and then being able to afford a mount when they hit 40. At this time, there are no planned changes for mounts at level 60 though. It's a bit unfortunate for the many people who have just bought their mount before hearing this news, but there are also going to be plenty more ways to get gold in the game now too. The base gold reward from all quests between 1 and 39 is also being increased, again to even things out with people leveling faster. Also in a different patch not so long ago, Blizzard also made it so elite and dungeon quests will now grant extra experience to make them a bit more worth doing. So yeah, if you were getting a bit tired of the 25 to 40 grind, or you were putting alts on a shelf, then it may be worth giving them another go once the patch hits. And I think for Season of Discovery, despite massively increasing how fast we can level being very unvanilla-like, in this case is the right call. Because in short, what people want to do is play the good class at the moment, but they don't want to invest equally into getting said class at the same level where their main is at, or their previous main. And others will feel as though their class isn't being addressed, while seeing others perform super well week after week after week. In every version of Classic so far, we have had a very good idea of what's going to be good well in advance. And now in Season of Discovery, for the first time ever, we don't. And that really is one of the biggest changes in the season. You know, back in original Wrath of the Lich King was when I first heard the term flavor of the month becoming popular. And that in part was because of how incredibly easy and fast it was to re-roll then. Back in original Wrath, there was no character boost either. It's just how the game plays with catch-up gear, heirlooms, character power, and so on. Vanilla was never like that. Not back in the day, not back in 2019. And even incredibly hardcore players in vanilla wouldn't raid or realistically play more than 2 or 3 characters, because vanilla forced you to have a main between the leveling grind, linear progression, ranking, rep grinds, and so on. And Season of Discovery is at odds with that playstyle, in that it wants you to check out all of the new new fun toys that classes are getting, and people kinda don't like being told, yes, your class sucks now, but it might not suck later. Maybe? All in all though, I'd feel differently about these buffs if it were on some kind of standalone Classic Plus type server, but for seasonal, fine, I think it makes sense. And the second big update to aid us in this new vanilla world where alts are now encouraged is going to be about our gold income. So heading into phase 2, I've mentioned once or twice that I think the gold sinks that Blizzard put in the game were excessive. They put mount costs back up, the general raw materials needed for the new crafted epics, the prices of the new schematics combined with leveling your professions, your abilities, and so on and so forth. But following the reset, this will be changing. In fact, and you've probably seen it already, but Blizzard have updated the rewards from the new reputation. And part of those changes were making it so the supply crate hand-ins would now award 5.5 gold or 12 gold, depending what you filled them with. Of course, the market has swiftly moved to price match the items needed to the rewards given, but this will put a price floor on materials for raw items or materials that go into said boxes, such that every player will just have more gold. There were also a few new items added for Honored and Revered, such as neck items and rings, which are both tradable across your account. And this is interesting too for, again, a reason I'll mention in a moment. And a bit of a side note here, I can't believe the number of posts I've seen about these items followed by the word retail and heirlooms. Yes, you can trade them across an account, but that is where the familiarity ends. It's essentially like buying something off of the auction house, which you use on an alt for a little bit, but instead of vendoring when you replace it, you can just trade it to another alt. They don't scale with level, they don't give any bonus XP, and it's not as though there are any rings or necks anyway until around level 20 or so. So it's just a small catch-up type item and a minor gold sink. Anyways, we already know the quests between 1 and 39 will give bonus gold, and of course 100% faster leveling means you hit level cap with loads more quests incomplete. And whilst the bonus XP will not convert to bonus gold after level 40, it will leave you with tons of content to go back and do to farm gold without having to start chipping away at quests that would have been good from 40 to 50. So yeah, everyone is going to be leveling super fast and everyone is going to be having more gold in general. Of course, prices of things decided by players will fluctuate with how much gold is in circulation, but prices for things which Blizzard set, such as mounts, abilities, schematics, and so on, will remain static and be more affordable. But I did mention that faster leveling would bring new issues with it. So what are those going to be then? Well, I've got two major things really. One is how a lot of people are choosing to level at the moment, specifically dungeon grinding. People are opting into this grind again and again, and I think it's going to cause more burnout the longer this goes on. At least there is some variety in questing because you're changing zones and fighting different enemies and stuff. And I'm just going to say it, dungeon grinding should not be better than questing. But certain, well, game-related features are making it so for many. The first problem are, wouldn't you know it, PvP servers. They're always more popular than PvE, and I swear a good chunk of people on PvP servers are there because of somebody else and it would not have been their first choice. In phase 1 you could level the majority of your time in uncontested zones and it was pretty chill. Phase 2 does not have this luxury. Not only that, but STV, which is the biggest zone for XP this phase by far, becomes very difficult to level in every 3 hours for 30 minutes, which depending on when you log in, may not line up with your playtime too well. And when you're a bit slower with your leveling or you're just working on an alt, you're going to run into bored mains looking for something to do. And that something may just be sending your level 34 shaman to the graveyard on repeat for an hour straight. So what do people do? They go dungeon grind so they don't have to deal with this. Another reason people opt into dungeon grinding is because of open world mob competition. So in phase 1, this was fine. I think hardcore servers gave Blizz tons of information on where players would get stuck early into the game, so they were able to tune things really well. But phase 2 has far too many bottleneck quests which are just very poorly tuned for the number of players that there are, even with as many layers as we have at the moment. A few, for example, the syndicate mobs in Hillsbrad Foothills, the Yeti cave in the middle of Hillsbrad, that one's always unplayable, the lesser rock elementals in northwestern Badlands, the Curzon mobs outside the cave in northeastern Stranglethorn, and so on. These are just a few examples I thought up. These quests are in every case A, good for experience, and B, part of quest chains, but doing them is just kind of painful, and it was worse to borderline unplayable on launch. A better job has to be done identifying such quests in the future and making sure this isn't a problem again. Also, typically on a fresh server, you dungeon grind one time on your main, and then you kinda just don't do it again for a month or so because you have a lot of stuff to do on your main. At the moment, people are getting done with the end game in a few weeks, and then they're locking themselves back inside the Scarlet Prison for another 10 levels every few weeks, and it's burning them out. Yes, people are absolutely doing this to themselves, but people are gonna take the easy route even if it's not fun, and that one's on the developer to think about. On top of that, dungeon grinding means people have few reasons to do dungeons at a level cap because A, they're just sick of doing them, and B, they got all the good items they needed whilst leveling. And dungeon grinding was the go-to thing to level with at the start of Phase 2 because the supply crates were just straight up not viable to level with, and BFD was less than 1 level every 3 days. And next phase, I really hope this scenario doesn't repeat itself. Phase 3, you'll be out of the Scarlet Prison and straight into the Sand Prison, aka Zul'Farrak, by the way. And I've even thought of another potential downside. If players aren't questing and are dungeon grinding, they aren't getting their new runes on the way to level cap either. I mean, I'm not expecting everyone to find their own runes or anything, but news often happens so fast that you can work getting your runes into leveling rather than doing them at level cap. So basically, in my opinion, dungeon grinding has problems. I'm not saying it should be flat out impossible, but I think questing and the open world should be made more appealing. The second issue with leveling faster across more alts are runes which are gained in the same way across different characters. So at the moment I'm talking about the Ratchet rune, Friendly with Your Rep, and Dark Riders. Now, I'm pretty confident that at some point runes will be tradable account-wide because of these heirloom type items which we now have in the game, which prove we can now trade stuff across our accounts. But historically, you can look back at pretty much any version of WoW you want, and you can see people do not like repeating the exact same grind on multiple characters. Attunements in TBC, Sons of Hodir in Original Wrath, Therizane in Kata, a lot of stuff in Mists of Pandaria, and so on and so forth. Other runes may start to get a bit excessive in number later on in phases 2, when we have dozens of them overall, but I have to imagine something will be planned for that. So overall, bonus XP and gold makes sense for a seasonal server. We need better ways to gain experience when a new phase releases. Dungeon grinding has serious burnout issues, and it also invalidates them at level cap. I think this needs to be looked at. There needs to be a better job done on identifying quest bottlenecks in the future, so to avoid issues in advance. And runes gained in the same way across multiple characters should probably be made tradable sooner rather than later. So that's that bit done, let's move on. So the currently unannounced level 50 raid will be 20 player, and Molten Core is also confirmed to be 20 player in Season of Discovery. Blizzard mentioned that setting up a raiding environment around 10 players and then suddenly asking them to upscale to 40 could cause issues, and they are totally right on this. It would have been a disaster. Guilds would have been forced to merge left and right, players on the new tank classes would lose out as far fewer tanks are needed in one 40-man raid compared to 4 10-mans, and communities built up for this season would just disappear. I did run a vote about 40-player raids prior to this announcement, as I saw people were pretty divided on it. It got over 14,000 votes, with 41% wanting 40-player raiding to return, and 59% not wanting it to make a comeback. It does still seem that Blizzard wants 40-player raiding at some point, seeing as it's unique to Classic, and they've been all about compromises so far, with one reset for the first 2 weeks of Noma or the pre-made changes, but I just can't help shake the feeling that it's going to be a bad idea. I feel like the people with the drive to lead guilds and raids that large, for the most part, either did it in 2019 Classic and just aren't going to want to do it again, or they're doing it right now on Classic Era. I think we see how 20-player raids go and whether they're right for the game. There may be a return to 40-man raiding in BWL and beyond, but at this point in time, I just really can't say. Next, we have a few words on itemization changes. Everyone loves a bit of purple loot, especially the new ones, so let's see what they have to say here. First, they plan to revamp many items from dungeons and raids, including existing 20-player raids, as well as adding tons of new items. They plan to adjust raids too relative to the new rewards which they may offer, with an example given of ZG not just being a catch-up raid, but as interesting as BWL from an upgrades perspective. They aren't trying to make raids super hard though, and still want everything to be very pug friendly. They can't share everything at the moment due to the discovery nature of the season, and things are ever changing internally, but ideally the endgame should cater towards differing raid sizes. I'm hoping to see some new tier set bonuses too, to fit some of the new class identities, or perhaps just for class identities which have always existed, who just didn't have a tier set. That's all from me today though, a pretty huge blue post, so I just wanted to cover my thoughts on all of it moving forwards. Definitely give feedback in regards to the changes and updates, and let me know what you think in the comments down below. And I have one last thing to say, which is, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you on the next one very soon.